So today I'm going to show you my system for trimming out a window. And now we're not just adding in the jambs and the trim, we're actually going to be use this bull nosing here and make a nice sill so that you can use this as a decorative shelf, maybe some herb plants and that sort of thing. It's in the kitchen. It's nice to dress it up a little bit. And whenever I'm doing a tile job with a window trim, I like to get the tile done first so that it has room for its expansion and contraction behind all my trims. Very key. And then I can build over top of it all and get a nice clean finished look without having cut tile all up and down the side of my window trims. I'm telling you right now, if you do it this way, your windows are going to look spectacular. They're going to have a huge pop. Let's just jump into this and we'll get the process started. So first of all, I'm in an old house, right? This is my 1880 farmhouse kitchen that we're renovating. And if you haven't been following along, then I suggest just click the link up here and you can start from the very beginning. But for everybody else who just wants to learn how to trim out a window, what we're looking at is using this regular 1x5 softwood lumber stock, okay? It's tongue and groove. And what we're doing is we're going to create a box. This is called the jamb extension. We're going to do the whole jamb extension first. And then we're going to insulate it and then trim it. And here's why. In an old house like this, foaming in the window, you want to be a little bit conservative with your foam so that you're not over foaming and causing it all to stick. But in the jamb area here is where we have the ability after the fact to really get another layer of expansion foam in there as a protection against drafts. So we're going to take full advantage of that. But first we have to cut and measure all of our jamb extensions to the exact depth from the window out to the face of the tile. So let's get started. So I'm going to use the back of this. I've already cut my first sill. It's wider than I need to. It makes my life simple. Now I've got a writing surface, okay? So I'm going to put bottom left, top right, and then bottom right. These are going to be my numbers so that I can measure, trace my lines, and cut all on the saw at the same time. So what I'm going to do is just take out my tape measure. So I'm going to just lay my wood across the tile to create my depth. And I'm going to measure this off, and it says 4 inches. Okay? So that's the bottom right. And then we're just going to do this all the way around the window, get all my numbers. Four and a quarter. All right. So now I've got my measurements. I'm going to first cut all of my lengths, and then I'm going to go take it out to the saw. So I already have my bottom, if you can imagine this. Okay. And because of the kind of sill trim that I'm going to use, I'm going to be bringing this up to about this spot on the window. About 1/8 of an inch below this trim. And I'm going to maintain that all the way around the window. When I purchased these windows, I had the option to have a track installed. It's a part of the PVC mold and it would receive the wood, but I find that to be very, very frustrating. And you have to install one piece at a time. There's a lot of other fussing around. I prefer to just go right up against the vinyl window and leave myself a little bit of an expansion gap and cover that gap with a finished white pure silicone. That way I don't have to worry about painting it, I don't get graying over time, and I don't have problems with expansion and contraction. So I'm going to leave 1/8 of an inch all the way around the outside of this window. Okay? So that's how I'm going to measure. So I'm going to measure from the inside down to that trim, 36 1/8, and I'm going to add 1/8 of an inch for the top. That takes me, that's actually a quarter, 36 1/4, 36 3/8. I'm going to put a little bit more on there. I'm going to go 36 1/2. So I need 2 at 36 1/2. And then I'm going to need one more across the top. I think for simplicity, we'll just go long. Yeah, we'll go 33 1/2, just like we did here. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to go to the saw. I'm going to cut my other jambs. I'm going to trace out my lines and run that through the table saw, and then we'll whip it all back together. So here's my top sill, and we are going to be running everything on the table saw so that the lead edge, okay, is not getting cut. We're going to cut the back side. And that's because we're going to add the silicone, and it's going to be a surface, kind of a cove bead. So it'll cover any of the inconsistencies on the table saw because I'm not cutting straight, I'm cutting on an angle. And it'll also give me a nice straight edge when I'm putting on my casing, so that all looks perfect. So you gotta imagine this upside down and installed, all right? The left side, I have my measurement, 4 1/4. And I'm gonna measure from my front edge, and you can just put an arrow on it if it helps. 4 1/4. And on this side, it is 4 inches. All right, that's one. That's the top, obviously. And this will be the left side. There's my lead edge, okay? Right, so here's the front. This is the bottom. It's 4 1/4 all the way across. So I don't have to mark that and trace it. I'll just set the guide on my saw for 4 1/4 for that one, makes it simple. The other side is 4. We'll set the guide for that one. And this one is the bottom. We'll call that my lead edge. Okay. The right side is 4 1/4. Sorry, the left side is 4 1/4, the right side is 4. There we go. Okay, so I've got all the information I need on these boards now. I'm gonna go with the saw once and make all my cuts. And remember, when you're working with this, don't be afraid if you take a little bit too much off. If you're an extra 16th or something, it's not gonna be an issue. Or if you're even a little bit too long, you're gonna be okay. Once you put this on, no surface is perfectly flat, especially in an old farmhouse. There's gonna be areas there where you're going to be using the silicone afterwards behind the wood, especially with detailed tile. So we're not being concerned about being perfect here. We're just making sure that we're gonna be close enough so that when we do all of our silicone work, then it looks perfect, all right? That's the secret. Don't be difficult and hard on yourself right now because everything here is expanding and contracting. So you wanna make sure you have a little bit of room everywhere for that to happen. If you make things too precise, you're gonna find out that everything, when it moves, it's gonna cause you issues. So let's get to the saw. So the piece that goes here, I actually ran through the saw really quickly and took off just a hair because it has a rounded edge naturally from the factory. And because I'm laminating the sill on there, I didn't want to have that. I need it nice and flat. So this is going to go here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this up just to mark where my wood is going to make contact. So an eighth of an inch past there, eighth of an inch past there. Okay, I'm going to translate that information to the other piece, which I cut the same length. This way, I'll help to ensure that my window stays square. All right. Now, I'm going to nail all of this together in advance of using any of this. Right? Nice and simple. I'm not dealing with a ton of extra space here, so I think we'll set it up like this. Oh yeah, lovely. One thing to remember, always use glue on your finished carpentry. You have to glue your joints, or you're not doing finished carpentry. You're just sticking wood together and it's all going to come apart again. All right. Now I'm using an 18 gauge finish nailer. It's just going to pop in 2 or 3. I got 2 inches in here right now, which is probably a little overkill. However, a little bit of know-how and self-control. We're going to be all right. Okay. So remember, I want to line this up on my pencil mark and flush on the front and not be too concerned. And don't leave your finger in the way. Just in the odd case that the nail comes back out. That is pain you don't ever want to experience. So the goal here, when you're working on site instead of in a shop, you got to be a little more creative. Generally speaking, we want to get that on that nail mark, the pencil mark, sorry. And then we'll get glue on this end. And then, there we go. This area here is all up against the window. If it doesn't make contact, it's not as big an issue as whether or not the front is flush. And let's see if we know what we're doing. Okay, yeah, that's gonna work. All right. Whew. Now, let's just double check this. And you can see, it is a little bit thicker than what I need, but my wall is so inconsistent. I'd rather be a little bit thicker. I'm loving that. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna use shims to put all this in place. But the best kind of shim in this situation, because I have a lot of room that I have to cover, is a couple of spare blocks of this. I'll be right back. So for anyone who's inquisitive and wants to know why there's two different kinds of foams on this window, it's because I was out of spray foam when we went to go and install this window the first time. And we did that in a video. We'll put that link in the description up in the card here. I used a foam from my local hardware store, and it expanded so much that I couldn't open the window. Unbelievable. I don't usually use that brand, and that's probably why. So I had to go back out to the store, get my other brand, and then cut out all that foam and reinstall the window. Unbelievable. Anyway, lesson learned, eh? Once you've got something you know that you like, stick with it. So, I'm gonna put these blocks down. Done. Now, I can shim the difference. That'll be a lot more convenient. Okay. Now the nature of shims is that they're wedges. And if you reverse them, put them together, they're the same thickness, which helps a lot. So I'm gonna go start with 2 on each side, just to get this closer to where we wanna be. Okay. Like I said, in an 1880s farmhouse, nothing is level except for what you put in. So you're forever making minor adjustments, eh? I'm liking this side, not liking this side yet. Bring up a little bit here. Okay, once you're happy with the height, you want to just check here and here, make sure that the gap is the same on both of those. Okay, don't worry about the top anymore once you get the height where you want it. We're just going to drive through the shim. Now generally, because we use a laser level when we install our windows, that should be perfect. It is. Once you have this installed level, this 1/8 gap should be consistent all the way to the top. And then you can just double check with your square. I mean, that's just money in the bank, isn't it? Taking the time to make things off of a laser when you're building makes everything simpler. So now I don't even have to think about it. I can just push, a little bit of resistance going the opposite direction with my 5-in-1 here, set my depth, 2 inch now. Good. Done. Now that's why I said we're going to use expansion foam later. Because of the nature of how this house is built, I don't have really good framing, so by throwing that expansion foam in, that's going to bond everything together really nicely. I'm just going to finish with a couple of nails here. Getting pressure to the window. Okay, nice. There we go. Step one is complete. Now, like I said, we want to also guard against drafts. Remember that there's two panes. This is a double hung. So I have a thermal layer here and a thermal layer here. They're different layers. If you fill the entire cavity with expansion foam so that you can take care of both of these thermal layers at the very beginning, you're going to run into trouble. So generally we don't get that expansive with it. See, my nails are just making contact. I'm not going to overshoot this with foam, but I am going to put in a little bit here so that I have a good bond. Okay, here we go. Just across the front. All right, I'm not going to overfill. That's basically the structure for my window now. All right, and a little bit down here. Make sure I got a good thermal break. There we go. Nice, of course, across the top. Ah! Here we are. Now, if you're shooting at the side instead of at the back, then you'll get the foam to fill in the front and it has room to grow into the back. If I just point straight in, I'm going to fill it so full this will all end up bowing out. All right, there we go. Close the gun. Love the foam gun. Just a quick note, when you're done, close the handle. Always set it upside down so that the gas isn't constantly leaking out. All right, it'll also keep it from falling over. Beautiful, that's it. Whew. Now we have a window jam. Now it's time for the fun part. Okay, now it's time for the sill. Now, this is going to get contact right there. All right, that is going to be a lot of fun. The way that we take care of this and measuring this out is you want to kind of find that middle of the window-ish, okay? And you could always take a pencil and mark a center line, and there you go. Now when you're working, you have something to reference from if it falls apart on you. But what I'm looking to do is set my window casing about there. I have a full rounded corner and I have a casing starting. And I want to make sure that when I put that casing there, I've got room to add my painter's caulking, and then I can paint that all together. So now my trim is going to go from about this point moving out. I want my sill to extend just a little bit past the full width of the trim. Now, let me show you this. I cut this earlier. That'll be the trim. Now, on that pencil mark there, which is about a full 1/8, maybe 3/16. Okay, now I have the width of my trim. I can make that mark. You can see that you don't want this extending way past there, but perhaps an inch up to where that tile is would look really good. Then I have a thinner version of the same trim series that's going to go underneath, all right? And you want that to go, you want that to finish up at the same point here as underneath. So we're going to extend this a little bit. So there's my mark. Here we go. Put this down before I get whacked in the head. So from my center mark, my trim was 19 3/8. Okay, so I'm going to add an inch to that, 20 3/8. And I'll go this way, and I'll rather cut this thing on both ends and know that I've got it the same dimension. Okay, that's where we're going to cut it. That's our length, right? But the outside corner of this is actually right here, right? But what we want to do is we want to cut that on a 45-degree angle. Isn't that interesting? So by using this square, you can line it up, create a cut line for your saw, right there. Okay, that's going to be my cut line. And then I'm also going to cut another piece so that this detail is cut opposite, like from this angle. Here, I'll cut this first. We got to square off the end. Don't ever work with trim from the factory. Always cut your end first before you measure, okay? They never come straight. And I'm going to cut that, I'm going to cut this. What this is going to give me is this piece to fit around so that this detail will go back to the wall. I'm going to do that on both sides. Just thought I would draw that out for you. When I come back from the saw, I'll fit this all together, glue it and nail it first, and then we can install it. Now you might notice, I don't know if it shows up on camera very well, but I've already pre-painted all this trim in the first coat. I just like it because it seems to save me a whole lot of effort and energy from bending over the counters and painting everything. I don't mind doing one coat when I'm done, but I don't want to have to do the primer and everything else. It's nice to get all that done first. Now I'm just taking a sanding block, getting rid of any of these loose hairs, okay? Get the right end, match it up, put on a little bit of glue, because we're gluing everything as we go here. Okay, which is why I have my counter covered in a garbage bag. Exactly where I want it. I'm going to fire in. Okay, here we are. Now the nail is really just designed to hold that in place until the glue dries. All right, so we're going to do both ends here. Choo-doo-doo. Okay, you can see this starting to come together, right? Now you can see this coming together. Okay, so next, because it's a sill, you might be putting things on here that are like 1 or 2 pounds, maybe 5 pounds. You want to actually attach this so it doesn't actually break off. The secret to that is this. Construction screws, okay? Not only do we want to make sure that it doesn't fall off, but we want to make sure that that is bonded with the glue so tightly, it's under compression, that it becomes one piece of wood. And because we cut it with the saw, that's going to be difficult. So we want to add the extra strength of the screw here, all right, so that we don't run into problems down the road. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put some pre-drill holes in here, because I want that screw to go exactly where I want it and into this trim. So I'm going to pre-drill my hole. Getting the screws in before I start is like having an extra pair of hands. All right, here we go. Whew. Okay. I don't really need to take the glue that far, do I? Going over the tile. What am I thinking? All right, here we go. Now, this is where having that center line comes in handy. You want to hold that center line together. Now you want to put your pressure right here. Make sure your sill is nice and flush. Because it's pre-drilled, it's going to go into that meat. Before you sink that screw all the way in, make sure all the other screws are started, because you could tilt everything out of position. All right, now we're ready. We actually want to drive the screw in till it's past the surface, and that gives us perfect compression. You want to do this until you have a hole that can be filled. And anybody who's a fan of my channel knows what's coming next. We're going to get some 45 foot, mix it up and fill that in. That way we can sand it back off and have a perfect paintable surface. All right, we're getting there. Now, just a note, if you go to a proper trim supplier, they do make this nosing as a one piece, if your window is the right dimension. Because our house is old, the dimensional number is thicker than usual, and I added an extra layer on top of the finished wood siding. I did not expect my window to bring it all the way in far enough that I could do this one piece. Turns out that I needed a ½ an inch more than the regular stock, so that's why I had to do a 2-piece. Doing it this way is nice and simple. If you were doing the 1-piece, you could literally just measure the whole length that you wanted, okay? And then you would just cut the L's out of the piece, and you still have to buy a piece of bullnose to do the rounded edge, right? So it's kind of like, I like doing 2-piece just because I have all that flexibility. I don't have to worry about making mistakes. Here we go. That is awesome. Now, we just have to put on our casing. Let's do that. This is as simple as measuring roughly, right? Right there. So I just translate my mark on here, and I put my pencil mark on a 45, and I'll get another couple pieces, and we'll do that. Yeah, about there. Now, just for fun, because I've leveled everything, I should be able to take both of these marks, and they should be in the same spot. Okay, there we go. So I am going to just put a little bit of a mark on there so I know. I'm going to go cut these and install them. Now, I enjoy the DeWalt gun, but there is one feature that drives me nuts. This gun doesn't stop shooting nails when it runs out. If you're like me, I used to have a rigid gun, and I tell you, I don't know why I bought this. It must have been on sale or something, but the rigid gun, it always stops when you run out of nails. I don't know how many times I've been just going along nailing in baseboards. Can't tell when you're out of nails. You turn around, everything's falling off the wall. You're like, anyway. I don't know why I needed to share that. I needed the vent. DeWalt, fix your gun. Here we go. Gonna get that on my mark that I like, and I'm driving these nails right into the jamb. That's all I've got to work with. Okay, then I'm going to measure and cut my top piece, and I need to have the flexibility to make sure everything closes up perfect. Here we are. Okay, so because we cut the jamb square, the same dimensions, I don't have to crawl up to the top to measure this. All I do is take this measurement across the bottom, and I can cut the top piece and put my miters on. It's no problem. Now this is just a 16th shy of 39. Nice. All right, and remember, wherever you have raw wood to raw wood, gotta glue. I'm gonna tell you every time I do it, because if you don't, your joints are guaranteed to crack. If you have cracking joints on your window trim and your baseboards, it's because they aren't gluing it properly. There's just no two ways around it. Some things in life you can make pretty for a weekend, but if you want it to be pretty forever, you just got to do it right. Okay, I'm not even going to think about this. I have 3/4 inch wood. I'm going to throw a nail in it now. Love nail guns, by the way. You know, in the old days, you'd pull off the trim that have this 2-inch spike that they had to put in with a hammer. God, to be a finished carpenter back in the day, eh? Unreal what they had to go through. All right, now we just want to make sure our gap is right. Nail in our jamb. Of course, we still have the piece underneath to do. We still have to do the caulking and the putty and the filler. Oh, I think we should probably get to all that in just a second here. This is the door casing. It's massive, right? This is a smaller version of the same trim. So it has the same trim profile, just without the flat piece, which makes it larger. This makes a great decorative detail underneath. It was also the perfect size for me because I've got these huge windows in a kitchen and I needed 2 counter plugs. So in order to make room, obviously I put the plugs on the side and I use a laser level to mount those so that everything is perfect. Now, this leaves me just enough room to get my cover plates on. Amazing. I'll take what I have and I'll show you 2 options for finishing underneath. One is the same thing. You cut the 45 return piece just like we did with the other And you know what? That's such a small piece of wood. I'm just gonna let that sit there. This is another situation where I'll use painter's tape, but I never use tape when I paint. That's just how it works, baby. There we go. There we go. That's all I need. I'm gonna set that aside to dry. So here's one option. I set the saw on 25 degrees and it's just a straight cut. Okay, there's no return trim. You can paint that in and you get that look. That's not terrible. Right? Now the way that you would install this, especially over tile, is you've got to really be thinking now, because you want to shoot on an angle just underneath that detailed trim up into the sill. Okay? And you can do that. And then you're not actually attaching this to the tile. You don't have to use no nails or any kind of adhesives. You just throw a few nails up there and you're good to go. When we're all done, we're going to put a thin line of silicone on here just to seal it up. And that would be the solution to that problem. There we go. Okay. Or, so we have that option, or we have this option. And you get to decide which one you like. Personally, I'm a big fan of cutting trims back to the return. They look sort of similar, but I just like that detail from the side. And when you're using thick trim, how it looks from the side is important. Okay. Now, all we have to do now is fill all of our holes up. Remember, when you're doing trim, just like in our other trim video, feel free to watch that. We'll put a link in the card here. We fill all of our nails with 45-minute compound for drywall because it's sandable and it doesn't shrink. I'll use the same stuff on all my nail holes. All the gaps here, I'm using a paintable latex door and window caulking, so it has some ability to expand and contract. And then around the window itself, when we're changing materials, that is going to be a thin line of super white silicone. That'll be after everything is painted and everything's finished. We'll also add that to the side of the here, next to the tile, to close this window up against the tile. But that gets done after the grout. Everything's a process, and if you're enjoying this kind of stuff, then click the link here. You can watch this kitchen renovation from the beginning. Trust me when I say this, we have a lot of videos about this kitchen renovation.